You already know the answer. Some part of you decided 3 days ago. And yet here you are, 1 a.m., lying in the dark, running the same loop you ran at 11 p.m., which is the same loop you ran at dinner, which is the same loop you have been running since the offer arrived in your inbox on Thursday. The spreadsheet is done. The pros column is longer. You have talked to 2 people whose opinions you trust, and both of them said the same thing. You have all the information you are going to get. And still, there is no resolution. Just the hum of the same questions cycling back through, slightly rearranged, asking to be answered one more time. This is not a crisis. That is what makes it so exhausting. It is just a Tuesday night, or a Wednesday, or whatever day it is now. Here is what you probably believe is happening. You believe that clarity is somewhere just ahead, that if you can find the right angle on this decision, think it through one more time with slightly more rigor, the fog will lift and you will know. So you keep going. You are not being irrational. You are being thorough. Thoroughness is supposed to work, except it is not working. And the longer you sit with that fact, the more unsettling it gets. Because the problem is not that you have not thought about this enough. The problem is the opposite. You have thought about it in every direction available to you, and every additional pass through the same material is not getting you closer to a decision. It is getting you further from sleep and deeper into the loop. More thinking is feeding the thing you are trying to resolve. The tool you are using is the thing making it worse. That is the trap, and it has a structure. The loop is not a thinking problem. It is an interruption problem. Your brain is not failing to reason through the decision. It is failing to receive a signal that the decision is closed. Those are completely different things, and they require completely different responses. Trying harder to think your way out of the first problem when you actually have the second one is like pressing harder on a door that opens the other way. The effort is real. The direction is wrong. In 1987, a psychologist named Daniel Wegner ran an experiment that has haunted cognitive science ever since. He asked people to spend 5 minutes not thinking about a white bear. Just that. Don't picture it. Simple enough. Except the more participants tried to suppress the thought, the more the white bear showed up, barging back in at roughly once per minute on average. When Wegner then told them they could think about the white bear freely, it flooded back with even greater intensity than in a control group who had never tried to suppress it. The technical term is rebound. What it means for you is this. The harder you push against the loop, the more your brain registers that thought is urgent and unresolved and worthy of priority attention. Suppression is not a solution. It is rocket fuel for the thing you are trying to quiet. You are not weak for being stuck here. You are not undisciplined. The system is working. It is just working in the wrong direction, and nobody told you that until right now. What the loop is actually doing, what it is built to do, and what you can give it instead of more thinking, that is what comes next. And it is more specific than anything you have heard about this before. So what is the loop actually doing while you lie there? Because it does not feel random. It feels purposeful, like your brain genuinely believes it is about to crack the problem open. And in a sense, it is right. It is just working with the wrong map. In 2001, a neurologist named Marcus Rachel at Washington University made a discovery that reframed how we understand the resting brain. He identified a network of regions that become more active when you are not focused on an external task. When you stop doing something, this network switches on. He called it the default mode network. And what does it do when it fires up? It runs simulations. It models the future. It rehearses threats. It replays the past looking for patterns. It is your brain's background process, humming along whenever you are not otherwise occupied. It is not a flaw. It is a feature. The problem is that at 1 a.m. with a deadline tomorrow, your default mode network does not know the difference between a genuine unresolved threat and a job offer you have already analyzed to exhaustion. To that system, unresolved means dangerous. And dangerous means keep going. Here is the part that makes it worse. Ari Kruglanski's research on cognitive closure showed that unresolved decisions stay tagged as active and accessible in the brain, like open tabs that never stop running in the background. The loop is not going rogue. It is waiting. It is waiting for a signal that the file has been closed, that the threat has been resolved, and that it can stand down. You never sent that signal, so it keeps running. Now here is where the standard advice falls apart completely. Someone in your life has told you to just stop overthinking, to distract yourself, to think positive. Maybe you have tried all three, and maybe they worked for about 11 minutes before the loop came back louder than before. That is not a failure of willpower. That is exactly what the research predicts. Wegner's suppression studies, run across nearly a decade from the late 1980s through the 1990s, showed consistently that actively trying not to think about something increases how often that thought intrudes, especially when you are under any kind of cognitive load, which you are, because you are stressed about the decision. Suppression does not quiet the loop. It files a report that says this thought is important enough to fight, and the brain responds accordingly. Distraction is a temporary ceasefire, not a resolution. The loop pauses, then resumes when the distraction ends. Unstructured journaling, where you just pour your thoughts onto a page, often makes it worse because it activates the same self-referential processing that is generating the loop in the first place. And mindfulness, which genuinely has a mechanism that works, becomes its own problem when the instruction is too vague. Because then you spend 20 minutes monitoring whether you are being mindful enough, which is a new loop nested inside the original one. Here is the thing nobody tells you. In some research, people with higher analytical intelligence are more susceptible to ruminative loops, not less. Anderson and Limpert's work on elaborative rumination found that sharper analytical thinkers generate more detailed, more branching follow-on scenarios. Your brain's ability to model complex outcomes, the same ability that makes you good at your job, at relationships, at planning, is the exact engine the loop is borrowing. That is not a coincidence. That is the cost of a well-built simulation machine with no off switch. And the cost is real. Barry Schwartz documented how people who try to maximize every decision, who push for the objectively best outcome rather than a good enough one, end up less satisfied with their choices than people who settle for sufficient. Better outcomes, measurably worse feelings. Susan Nolan Hoeksema at Yale spent 30 years studying rumination and found it is one of the strongest predictors of depression onset, not because the people doing it are fragile, but because sustained threat detection activation generates negative emotion as a byproduct. The loop produces the very feeling it claims to be protecting you from. So if suppression fails, and distraction stalls, and more thinking tightens the coil, what actually works? The answer is not what you expect. You do not calm the loop down, you close it. And closing it is a specific action, not a state of mind. So what does closing the loop actually look like? Not as a concept. As an action you take tonight, or tomorrow morning, or the next time you feel the cycle starting to tighten. The first thing to understand is that every technique that actually works does the same thing at the mechanism level. It hands the brain a resolution output, not a better argument, not a calmer feeling, an output, something the system can file under done, stored, handled. The loop is a waiting room. These techniques are the signal that finally calls your name. James Pennebaker spent years at the University of Texas running what looked like a deceptively simple experiment. He asked people to write about their deepest worries for 15 to 20 minutes a day over several days. Not freely, not as venting, but with structure. Name the worry, describe the worst case, assess how likely that outcome actually is. The results were striking enough that they replicated across dozens of studies. Structured, expressive writing reduced rumination and produced measurable changes in immune function, sleep quality, and psychological distress. Not because writing magically solved anything, because it converted an open, circling threat into a filed, bounded document. The brain stopped treating it as unfinished business because it now had a form and a container. That is the principle. The loop runs on open variables. Close the variable, and the loop has nothing left to rotate around. Peter Gallwitzer at New York University found a similarly elegant solution in what he called implementation intentions. The format is simple. If this happens, I will do that. Not a goal, a pre-committed response path. If I feel overwhelmed by this decision tomorrow, I will write it down and review it at 6 p.m. If I am still uncertain by Friday, I will choose the option with more reversibility. That specific structure removes the open variable the loop is trying to solve by solving it in advance. You are not making the decision. You are deciding how you will handle the decision, and that is enough to quiet the system. Scheduled worry time sounds almost absurd, but Borkovic and colleagues found that containing rumination to a defined 20-minute window each day reduces how often intrusive thoughts surface outside that window. The brain accepts postponement as a form of closure. You are not dismissing the concern. You are telling the system it has an appointment, and the system, remarkably, believes you. And if the loop has already taken hold, if you are in it right now and the cognitive approaches feel out of reach, there is a more direct path. Brief physical disruption, cold water on your face, a short, sharp burst of exercise changes your somatic state fast enough to lower amygdala reactivity and create a window where your prefrontal cortex can actually function. You are not calming down. You are shifting the biological conditions so that reasoning becomes possible again. But knowing these tools only helps if you can recognize when to use them. Loops have a signature. You are circling the same question. You are generating new variations of the same concern without producing new information. You have enough to decide, and you know it, and you are still going. That is the diagnostic. Ask yourself one question. Is this thought producing something new, or is it recycling what I already have? If it is recycling, the loop has started. Name it. Say it plainly, even just in your own head. I am in a loop. Research by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA found that labeling a cognitive or emotional state, simply naming what is happening, reduces amygdala reactivity and activates the prefrontal cortex. Named, not solved. That small act of observation is itself an interruption, which brings us back to the bed, the deadline, the spreadsheet with the longer prose column, the loop that would not close no matter how many times you ran it. The problem was never the job offer. It was never insufficient data or insufficient discipline. The loop was waiting for a signal that never came. One structured page of writing, 15 minutes, worst case named and bounded, a review time assigned, the file closed. That is what the system was asking for the whole time. Not more thinking. A different kind of action entirely. Your brain is not broken. It is running an ancient threat detection protocol on a modern calendar problem, and it will keep running until you give it what it actually needs. You know what that is now. The loop is not stronger than you. It just needed a door.